My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I've been cleaning houses for over 15 years. I've scrubbed floors until my knees bled, polished silver until my fingers cramped, and smiled through countless humiliations because I needed the money. But nothing prepared me for the day that would change my life forever, the day Richard Blackwood denied me a raise and set in motion events that would make me richer than him. It was a crisp October morning in 2019 when I arrived at the Blackwood Mansion in Beverly Hills. The house was a monument to excess: 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a wine cellar worth more than most people's homes, and a garage filled with cars that cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. I'd been cleaning this house for 3 years, and every day I was reminded of the vast gulf between my world and theirs. Richard Blackwood was a tech mogul who'd made his fortune in software development. At 52, he was worth an estimated $800 million, owned multiple properties around the world, and was known for his ruthless business practices. His wife, Victoria, was a former model who spent her days shopping and attending charity galas where she pretended to care about causes she knew nothing about. That morning, I'd finally worked up the courage to ask for something I'd been putting off for months: a raise. I was making $15 an hour, which was barely enough to cover my rent in a one-bedroom apartment in East LA, my daughter Maria's college expenses, and my mother's medical bills. I'd been working for the Blackwoods for 3 years without a single increase in pay, despite taking on additional responsibilities and maintaining their home to perfection. "Mr. Blackwood," I said as he sat in his marble-clad kitchen, reading the Wall Street Journal while sipping coffee that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" He barely looked up from his newspaper. "What is it, Elena?" "I'm busy." "Sir, I've been working for your family for 3 years now, and I was wondering if we could discuss my compensation. I've taken on additional duties, and I believe my work has been exemplary." "Elena," he interrupted, finally looking at me with the kind of dismissive glance he might give to an annoying insect. "You're a maid. You clean houses. It's not exactly rocket science. $15 an hour is more than generous for someone with your skill set." The condescension in his voice made my cheeks burn with shame and anger. "Mr. Blackwood, I have a daughter in college and my mother needs medical care. The cost of living has increased, and I haven't had a raise in 3 years. That's not my problem," he said, turning back to his newspaper. "If you don't like the pay, you're free to find another job. There are plenty of people who would be grateful for the opportunity to work in a house like this." "But sir, I've been loyal to your family. I've never missed a day. I've gone above and beyond." "Elena," he said, his voice growing cold and sharp. "You seem to be confused about your position here. You're the help. You're replaceable. I could have 10 people lined up to take your job by this afternoon. The fact that you think you deserve more money for doing basic cleaning shows a fundamental misunderstanding of your value." His words hit me like physical blows. I stood there, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and humiliation, watching this man who had everything dismiss my worth as a human being as if I were nothing. "Now," he continued without even looking at me, "I believe the guest bathrooms need attention. Victoria is having her book club over this afternoon, and everything needs to be perfect." I wanted to quit right then and there. I wanted to tell him exactly what I thought of him and his arrogant attitude. But I couldn't. I needed this job. My daughter Maria was in her junior year at UCLA studying engineering, and my mother's diabetes medication cost $400 a month even with insurance. I swallowed my pride, nodded, and walked away, but as I cleaned those guest bathrooms, scrubbing toilets for a man who thought I was worthless, something inside me snapped. Not in a way that made me want to quit or give up, but in a way that made me determined to prove him wrong. I'd show Richard Blackwood that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life by underestimating me. You see, what Richard Blackwood didn't know was that I wasn't just a maid. I'd grown up in a family of inventors and tinkerers. My father had been a mechanic who could fix anything, and he'd taught me to see problems as puzzles waiting to be solved. My mother had been a seamstress who could create beautiful clothes from scraps of fabric. I'd inherited both their practical intelligence and their creative problem-solving abilities. More importantly, Richard didn't know that I'd been observing his household for 3 years, noticing inefficiencies and problems that his wealth had blinded him to. While he saw a perfectly functioning mansion, I saw dozens of small issues that could be improved with the right solutions. That afternoon, as I watched Victoria struggle with her high-tech coffee machine for the 3rd time that week, an idea began to form in my mind. The machine was a $3,000 Italian import that was supposed to make perfect espresso at the touch of a button. But it was overly complicated, broke down frequently, and required constant maintenance. Victoria had complained about it numerous times, but Richard kept insisting it was the best money could buy. As I cleaned around the kitchen, I noticed other problems too. The smart home system that controlled the lights and temperature was constantly malfunctioning. The automated pool cleaning system broke down every few months. The high-end appliances that filled their kitchen were beautiful but impractical for daily use. That evening, after I finished my shift and returned to my small apartment, I sat at my kitchen table with a notebook and began writing down every problem I'd observed in the Blackwood household. Not just their house, but problems I'd seen in all the wealthy homes I'd cleaned over the years. The pattern was clear: wealthy people were buying expensive, over-engineered solutions to simple problems. They were paying premium prices for products that looked impressive but didn't work reliably in real-world conditions. There was a market for simple, elegant solutions that actually worked. I thought about my own life and the creative solutions I'd developed over the years. When my old vacuum cleaner died and I couldn't afford a new one, I'd modified a shop vacuum with attachments I made from PVC pipe and fabric. It worked better than any expensive vacuum I'd ever used. When Maria needed a desk for her room but we couldn't afford furniture store prices, I'd built one from salvaged materials that was more functional than anything we could have bought. The idea that would change my life came to me at 2 a.m. as I lay in bed thinking about Victoria's coffee machine struggles. What if I could create a simple, reliable coffee maker that delivered perfect results without all the complicated technology? Something that worked consistently, was easy to maintain, and cost a fraction of what these wealthy people were paying for their temperamental machines? I got up and started sketching. I drew designs for a coffee maker that used basic principles of physics and engineering to create perfect coffee every time. No complicated electronics, no proprietary pods, no expensive maintenance contracts. Just simple, elegant engineering that solved the real problem: making great coffee reliably and affordably. Over the next few weeks, I continued working for the Blackwoods, but my mind was elsewhere. I was observing, learning, and planning. Every condescending comment from Richard, every dismissive glance, every reminder that I was just the help, fueled my determination. I started researching patents, manufacturing processes, and business formation. I used the computers at the public library to learn about product development and marketing. I watched YouTube videos about prototyping and manufacturing. I was building knowledge and skills that Richard Blackwood assumed I could never possess. 3 months after Richard denied me a raise, I had my first working prototype. I'd built it in my kitchen using parts from hardware stores and salvaged materials. It wasn't pretty, but it worked perfectly. It made coffee that was better than anything that came out of Victoria's $3,000 machine, and it did it with parts that cost less than $50. I knew I was onto something big, but I also knew that having a good idea wasn't enough. I needed to turn this prototype into a real product, and that required money, expertise, and connections I didn't have. What I did have was determination, intelligence, and a burning desire to prove that Richard Blackwood had been catastrophically wrong about my worth. I started small. I made a few more prototypes and gave them to friends and neighbors to test. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. People loved the simplicity, reliability, and the quality of coffee it produced. Word began to spread in my community about Elena's amazing coffee maker. One of my testers was Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman whose house I cleaned on weekends. She mentioned my coffee maker to her son David, who happened to be a patent attorney. David was intrigued enough to visit me and see the prototype in action. "Elena," he said after testing the machine, "this is remarkable. Have you considered patenting this design?" "I've thought about it, but I don't have money for a patent attorney." David smiled. "Let me make you a proposition. I'll help you file the patent application in exchange for a small equity stake in whatever company you form. I think you're sitting on something that could be very valuable." That was the moment I knew my life was about to change. I was no longer just a maid with a good idea. I was an inventor with a patent-pending product and a lawyer who believed in my vision, but I had no idea that within 2 years, my simple coffee maker would make me wealthier than the man who told me I was worthless. I had no idea that Richard Blackwood would soon be begging me for a job, or that I'd have the sweet satisfaction of reminding him that some people are worth much more than their current circumstances suggest. The woman he dismissed as just the help was about to become his biggest competition, and eventually, his boss. 6 months after Richard Blackwood's humiliating rejection, I was no longer just Elena Rodriguez, the maid. I was Elena Rodriguez, founder and CEO of Simple Brew Technologies, and my life was changing faster than I could have ever imagined. The patent application David Chen had helped me file was approved in record time. Apparently, my design was so innovative and different from existing coffee makers that the patent office fast-tracked it. I now held patent #10.847.392.4, a simplified brewing system with integrated temperature control and extraction optimization. Fancy words for a coffee maker that actually worked the way people wanted it to, but having a patent was just the beginning. I still needed to manufacture and market my product, and that required capital I didn't have. My savings account had exactly $847, and my credit cards were maxed out from Maria's college expenses and my mother's medical bills. That's when I made a decision that terrified and excited me in equal measure. I was going to try crowdfunding. I spent weeks learning about platforms like Kickstarter and Indiegogo. I watched hundreds of successful campaigns, studying what worked and what didn't. I learned about video production, social media marketing, and campaign management. Every evening after my cleaning jobs, I'd come home and work on my campaign until 2 a.m. The hardest part was making the video. I didn't have money for professional production, so I filmed it myself in my tiny kitchen using my phone and a tripod I borrowed from Maria. I must have recorded 50 takes before I got one I was happy with. I end the video, I told my story honestly. I talked about being a maid who'd been denied a raise, about observing problems in wealthy households, and about developing a solution that worked better than products costing 20 times more. I demonstrated my coffee maker, showed how simple it was to use and maintain, and explained why it was superior to existing products. My name is Elena Rodriguez, I said to the camera, and I've spent 15 years cleaning houses for wealthy families. I've seen them struggle with expensive, complicated appliances that break down constantly and deliver inconsistent results. I've also seen how much they pay for these products, often thousands of dollars for machines that don't work as well as the simple solution I've developed in my kitchen. I launched my Kickstarter campaign on a Tuesday morning in March 2020, just as the world was beginning to shut down due to COVID-19. I was terrified that the timing was terrible, but it turned out to be perfect. With everyone stuck at home, people were paying more attention to their daily routines, including their morning coffee. My goal was modest: $25,000 to fund the first production run of 500 units. I figured if I could sell those, I'd have enough money to fund a larger production run and start building a real business. The campaign started slowly. The first day, I raised $1,200 from friends, family, and neighbors. The second day brought in another $800. I was beginning to worry that I'd set my goal too high. Then something unexpected happened. A tech blogger named Marcus Williams discovered my campaign and wrote about it on his popular blog, Tech for Everyone. His article was titled, "The Maid Who's Revolutionizing Coffee: Why Simple Sometimes Beats Sophisticated." Elena Rodriguez isn't a Stanford MBA or a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. Marcus wrote. She's a house cleaner from East LA who got tired of watching wealthy people struggle with overpriced, over-engineered coffee machines. Her solution is so simple and elegant that it makes you wonder why no one thought of it before. This is what real innovation looks like. The article went viral. Within 24 hours, my campaign had raised $15,000. Within a week, I'd hit my $25,000 goal. But the momentum didn't stop there. People were sharing my story on social media, tech websites were writing about my campaign, and orders kept pouring in. Local news stations picked up the story. I was invited to appear on morning shows to demonstrate my coffee maker and talk about my journey from maid to entrepreneur. Each appearance brought more backers and more attention. The most surreal moment came when I was featured on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine with the headline, "From Maid to Millionaire, the Elena Rodriguez Story." The article detailed my background, my invention, and my crowdfunding success. It also mentioned that I was still working as a maid while running my campaign. Rodriguez represents a new type of entrepreneur, the article stated. She didn't come from privilege or have access to venture capital. She identified a real problem through years of observation and hard work, then developed a solution using intelligence, creativity, and determination. Her success proves that innovation can come from anywhere. By the time my Kickstarter campaign ended, I had raised $847,000 from over 12,000 backers. I was no longer worried about funding my first production run, I was worried about fulfilling orders for 12,000 coffee makers. That's when I met Jennifer Walsh, a manufacturing consultant who specialized in helping small companies scale production. Jennifer had been following my campaign and reached out to offer her services. "Elena," she told me during our first meeting, "you've got something special here. But you're going to need help transitioning from prototype to mass production. The good news is that your design is simple enough to manufacture efficiently. The challenge will be maintaining quality while scaling up." Jennifer helped me find a manufacturing partner in Ohio that specialized in small appliances. The owner, Tom Bradley, was a former engineer who'd started his own factory after being laid off from a large corporation. He understood the challenges of bringing a new product to market and was willing to work with a startup. "Your design is brilliant in its simplicity," Tom told me after reviewing my specifications. "Most coffee makers today are over-engineered. You've stripped away everything unnecessary and focused on what actually matters: consistent temperature, proper extraction time, and ease of use. This is going to be much easier to manufacture than most products we see." While I was working with Jennifer and Tom to set up production, something else was happening that I hadn't expected. Other companies were starting to take notice of my success. I began receiving calls from investors, acquisition offers from larger companies, and partnership proposals from established brands. The most interesting call came from David Kim, a venture capitalist who specialized in consumer products. David had been following my story and wanted to meet to discuss investment opportunities. "Elena," he said during our meeting at a coffee shop in downtown LA, "what you've accomplished is remarkable. You've proven there's a market for your product, you've built a brand, and you've done it all without any outside investment. Most entrepreneurs would kill for the validation you've achieved." "Thank you, but I'm not sure I need investors. My crowdfunding campaign gave me enough money to get started." "That's exactly why I want to invest," David laughed. "You're not desperate for money, which means you'll make smart decisions about partnerships. But Elena, if you want to build a real company, something that can compete with the major appliance manufacturers, you're going to need more capital than crowdfunding can provide." David was offering $2 million for a 20% stake in my company, which would value Simple Brew Technologies at $10 million. A year earlier, I'd been making $15 an hour cleaning houses. Now someone was telling me my company was worth $10 million. I told David I needed time to think about it. The truth was, I was overwhelmed by how quickly everything was moving. I was still working part-time cleaning houses. I'd reduced my schedule but hadn't quit entirely, trying to manage production of 12,000 coffee makers, handling customer service for my Kickstarter backers, and fielding calls from reporters and investors. That's when I made another decision that would prove crucial. I hired my daughter Maria as my first employee. Maria had just graduated from UCLA with a degree in industrial engineering, and she'd been following my journey with a mixture of pride and amazement. When I offered her a job as my operations manager, she accepted immediately. "Mom," she said, "I've watched you work 3 jobs to put me through college. Now it's my turn to help you build something amazing." Having Maria on the team changed everything. She brought technical expertise, organizational skills, and a fresh perspective that complemented my practical experience. Together, we refined the production process, improved the product design, and developed systems for managing our growing business. By December 2020, we had successfully fulfilled all our Kickstarter orders and were receiving hundreds of new orders every week through our website. Customer reviews were overwhelmingly positive, with many people saying our coffee maker had replaced much more expensive machines in their kitchens, but the most satisfying moment came when I received an unexpected phone call. "Elena? This is Victoria Blackwood. I hope you remember me." I certainly did remember Victoria Blackwood, though I was surprised to hear from her. "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood. How can I help you?" "Well, this is a bit embarrassing, but I heard about your coffee maker from a friend who backed your Kickstarter campaign. She brought one to our book club, and the coffee was absolutely incredible. I was wondering if I could order one for myself." The irony was delicious. The woman whose kitchen I'd cleaned for 3 years, whose temperamental $3,000 coffee machine I'd watched malfunction countless times, was now calling to buy my $89 coffee maker. "Of course," I said, trying to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. "I'd be happy to send you one. Thank you so much. And Elena, I heard about your success. Congratulations. It's really quite remarkable what you've accomplished." After I hung up, I sat in my new office. I'd rented a small space in a business park in East LA, and reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, Victoria Blackwood had been my employer, someone whose approval I'd sought and whose dismissive attitude I'd endured. Now she was my customer, calling to buy a product I'd invented, but I knew the real test was still coming. Richard Blackwood hadn't called yet, but I had a feeling he would soon. And when he did, I'd be ready for him. What I didn't know was that my success was about to accelerate even further, and that within 6 months, I'd be in a position to buy the very company where Richard Blackwood worked. The Maid he dismissed as worthless was about to become one of the most successful entrepreneurs in America. The best was yet to come. By the summer of 2021, Simple Brew Technologies had become a phenomenon that no one, including myself, had anticipated. What started as a simple coffee maker invented in my kitchen had evolved into a multi-product company that was revolutionizing the small appliance industry. Our original coffee maker had sold over 100,000 units, generating $8.9 million in revenue. But more importantly, it had established our brand as the go-to choice for people who wanted reliable, well-designed appliances without the premium price tag or unnecessary complexity. Building on that success, Maria and I had expanded our product line. We developed a simplified blender that outperformed machines costing 3 times more, a toaster that actually toasted bread evenly, and a food processor that was both powerful and easy to clean. Each product followed the same philosophy: identify what people actually need, design a solution that works reliably, and price it fairly. The business press had taken notice. Forbes featured me on their Self-Made Women list, estimating my net worth at $47 million. Incorporated magazine named Simple Brew Technologies one of the fastest-growing companies in America. Harvard Business School invited me to speak about innovation from unexpected places. But the most satisfying recognition came from an unexpected source. The very industry that had dismissed me was now trying to copy me. Major appliance manufacturers were scrambling to develop simplified versions of their products. Marketing campaigns suddenly emphasized reliability and ease of use over flashy features. Several companies had even tried to poach my employees, offering salaries I couldn't match. The irony wasn't lost on me. An industry built on planned obsolescence and feature creep was now trying to learn from a former maid who'd figured out that sometimes less really is more. That's when I received the phone call that would complete my transformation from dismissed employee to industry leader. Ms. Rodriguez? This is James Patterson, CEO of Blackwood Industries. I knew the name. Blackwood Industries was Richard Blackwood's company, the tech firm that had made him hundreds of millions of dollars. But I was surprised to hear from the CEO personally. Mr. Patterson, what can I do for you? Ms. Rodriguez, I'll be direct. We've been following your company's success with great interest. Your approach to product development and your understanding of consumer needs is exactly what our industry needs. We'd like to discuss a potential acquisition of Simple Brew Technologies. An acquisition offer from Blackwood Industries. The symmetry was almost too perfect to believe. I'm listening, I said, though I'd already decided I wasn't interested in selling. We're prepared to offer $150 million for your company. That would make you one of the wealthiest women in the appliance industry overnight. $150 million. 18 months earlier, I'd been making $15 an hour and been told I was worthless. Now I was being offered enough money to buy a small country. That's a generous offer, Mr. Patterson, but I'm not interested in selling. Ms. Rodriguez, I understand the emotional attachment to a company you've built, but $150 million is life-changing money. You could retire tomorrow and never work another day. Mr. Patterson, with respect, I didn't build this company to retire. I built it to prove a point. And I'm not finished proving it yet. What would it take to change your mind? I paused, considering my response carefully. An idea was forming in my mind, an idea so audacious it made me smile. Actually, Mr. Patterson, I have a different proposition for you. Instead of you buying my company, what if I bought yours? The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. I'm sorry, did you say you wanted to buy Blackwood Industries? That's exactly what I said. Your company is valued at about $800 million, correct? I think I could raise that amount. Ms. Rodriguez, I appreciate your confidence, but Blackwood Industries is a publicly traded company with thousands of employees and complex technology assets. It's not exactly comparable to a small appliance startup. You're right, it's not comparable. Your company makes software that becomes obsolete every few years. My company makes products that solve real problems for real people. Which business model do you think is more sustainable? After I hung up, I called David Kim, the venture capitalist who'd been trying to invest in my company for over a year. David, remember when you offered to invest $2 million for 20% of my company? Of course. That offer still stands, though I suspect your valuation has increased significantly since then. It has. But I have a different proposition. How would you feel about helping me acquire a much larger company? How much larger? About $800 million larger. David was quiet for a moment. Elena, are you talking about acquiring Blackwood Industries? I am. And I think I know how to do it. Over the next few weeks, David and I worked with a team of investment bankers to structure a deal that seemed impossible but was actually quite feasible. Blackwood Industries was profitable but not growing. Their stock price had been stagnant for 2 years, and investors were getting restless. Meanwhile, Simple Brew Technologies was growing at 300% annually and had captured the attention of every major retailer in America. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We'd offer a stock swap that would give Blackwood Industries shareholders ownership in a fast-growing company in exchange for their shares in a stagnant one. We'd finance the deal through a combination of private equity, bank loans, and a public offering of Simple Brew stock, but the most important element of the deal wasn't financial, it was personal. I insisted that Richard Blackwood be retained as an employee, reporting directly to me. 3 months later, the deal was announced. Elena Rodriguez, former Maid, was acquiring Blackwood Industries for $847 million in a complex transaction that would create one of the largest consumer products companies in America. The business press went crazy. From Maid to mogul, the Elena Rodriguez story continues, was the headline in the Wall Street Journal. The $847 million revenge was how Forbes characterized the deal, but the best moment came on the day I walked into the Blackwood Industries headquarters as the new owner. Richard Blackwood was waiting in the lobby, looking older and more tired than I remembered. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked like humility mixed with disbelief. "Elena," he said, extending his hand. "Congratulations. This is quite remarkable." "Thank you, Richard. I'm looking forward to working with you." "About that? I assume you'll be making changes to the leadership team." "Some changes, yes. But I'd like you to stay on. I think you could learn a lot from working for someone you once considered worthless." He winced at the reminder of his words from 2 years earlier. "Elena, about that day. I owe you an apology. I was wrong. Completely wrong." "Yes, you were. But Richard, I'm not keeping you on to humiliate you. I'm keeping you on because I believe people can change, and because your technical expertise could be valuable if properly directed." "What would my role be?" "You'll be Vice President of Product Development, reporting to me. Your job will be to help us apply the simple brew philosophy to technology products. Simple, reliable, affordable solutions to real problems." "And my salary?" I smiled. $15 an hour. The look of shock on his face was priceless. For a moment, he seemed to think I was serious. "I'm kidding, Richard. Your salary will be $200,000 annually, plus equity based on performance. But I want you to remember that number, $15 an hour. That's what you thought I was worth. I want you to think about that every time you're tempted to dismiss someone based on their current circumstances rather than their potential." 6 months later, Richard Blackwood had become one of my most effective employees. The humbling experience of working for someone he'd once dismissed had changed him in ways I hadn't expected. He'd become an advocate for promoting from within, for recognizing talent regardless of background, and for treating all employees with respect. More importantly, he'd helped us develop a line of simplified smart home products that were already outselling the complicated systems his old company had produced. It turned out that when you stripped away his arrogance and focused his technical skills on solving real problems, Richard was actually quite good at his job. The ultimate vindication came when Victoria Blackwood invited me to speak at one of her charity galas. I stood on the stage of the Beverly Hills Hotel, looking out at an audience of wealthy philanthropists, many of whom had houses I'd once cleaned. 2 years ago, I told them, I was cleaning houses in this very neighborhood. I was told by one employer that I was just the help and that I was replaceable. Tonight, I stand before you as the CEO of a company worth over $2 billion, employing over 5,000 people, and proving that innovation and value can come from the most unexpected places. The lesson isn't that everyone should quit their job and start a company. The lesson is that we should never underestimate human potential based on current circumstances. The person cleaning your house, serving your food, or parking your car might have ideas that could change the world, if we're wise enough to listen and humble enough to learn. After my speech, dozens of people approached me with their own stories of being underestimated or dismissed. Many were domestic workers, service employees, and others whose contributions were often overlooked. I realized that my success had given me a platform to advocate for people who rarely had a voice in these circles. That's when I announced the Elena Rodriguez Foundation, dedicated to providing education, mentorship, and funding for entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. The foundation's first initiative was a program that would provide business training and startup capital for domestic workers who had innovative ideas. "Everyone deserves the chance to prove their worth," I said at the foundation's launch. "No one should be dismissed as just the help when they might be the next great innovator." Today, as I sit in my office overlooking downtown Los Angeles, I often think about that morning when Richard Blackwood told me I was replaceable. He was right, in a way. Anyone could have cleaned his house. But he was catastrophically wrong about my potential and my worth as a human being. The maid he dismissed as worthless had become his boss, his teacher, and ultimately, his advocate for treating all people with dignity and respect. My invention hadn't just made me rich, it had taught an entire industry that simple solutions often work better than complicated ones, and that innovation can come from anywhere. But the most satisfying part of my success isn't the money or the recognition. It's the knowledge that I've proven something important, that human worth isn't determined by current circumstances, but by potential, determination, and the willingness to never give up on yourself, even when others have given up on you. The Woman who was once told she was just the help had helped change an entire industry's understanding of what real innovation looks like. And that, more than any amount of money, was worth everything. Warning: legal notice. This story is completely fictional and has been created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, actual events, or real companies is purely coincidental.